Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, take 2. Long story, but here we are in casual environment talking Nikon.
We are indeed. First up, we would like to thank you for all of your votes so far. As you know, we won the Retailer of the Year not the Retailer of the Year. We won the Good Service Award from Amateur Photographer, thanks to your votes. We have now been nominated for Retailer of the Year with the British Photographic Industry News. And if you would like to vote for us, please drop an email to info@bpinews.co.uk. We would very much appreciate it.
So basically we won everything. What is there?
We want to win everything.
All right.
Why not?
And just so if you haven't seen us before, I'm Konstantin.
And I'm Becky.
And we do things Nikon.
We do.
All right, let's move on to the main story of the week. So Nikon Z9 has been announced, well, the development.
Exactly.
And well, we talked about it last week on our Friday live stream, and we covered a lot of it. There are a few more things that came through for more news. So shall we move to the things that we already know?
Yes, the things that we know with certainty.
Yes.
So first up, we have primary use for sport, wildlife, and news photographers, as well as videographers.
They mentioned that now they designed the cameras with videographers in mind.
Yes, which we kind of speculated about, but it's good to know. They also have a newly developed high-resolution stacked FX CMOS sensor. According to Nikon Rumours, 3 different sensors were tested. So we have a 45 to 46 megapixel sensor, a 50 and a 60 megapixel sensor. Nikon Rumours received the most tips for a 50 megapixel sensor based on what's inside the new Sony A1, but improved with even better performance.
Interesting. And then with the new sensor, there will become a new X-Speed processor as well, which is designed for 8K in mind. So 8K requires quite a lot of data, so all they did, they opened the tabs to allow all this beautiful 8K footage to come through
the pipeline.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of 8K, we know it's there. We don't know the specifics yet, but it's quite certain to say that there will be 30 frames per second, obviously 25 and 24. There will be 10-bit recording, at least for 4K. And we also probably will see 4K resolutions, frames per second, as high as 120 frames.
That would be good. We also know that there will be an integrated vertical grip, so it is going to be a pro-sized body. The picture that's been released isn't the final image of the camera, but it gives us a good kind of pointer as to what it's going to look like.
Nice. And now let's move on to what we don't know. So let's just speculate a little bit. So we talked about newly developed sensor. Now, we don't know where this sensor comes from. Is it Nikon that developed it? Is it Sony sensor with a Nikon special source? Or the third party?
Yeah, so Tom Hogan, who we love on the podcast,
always
writes, in the last 20 years, Nikon has used image sensors manufactured by Aptina, Renesas, Toshiba, and Tower Semiconductor, as well as Sony Semiconductor. At the moment, I'm aware of 3 companies that are delivering production quantity stacked image sensors, mostly smartphone sizes though. Omnivision, Samsung, and Sony Semiconductor. A couple of others, including Nikon, have now demonstrated R&D projects with stacked semiconductor technologies. So neither Omnivision nor Samsung seem to be making large format sensors at the moment. So the natural assumption is that Sony Semiconductor would be the only one able to provide a Nikon stacked image sensor.
Interesting.
So Sony's known stacked sensors, however, appear to utilize 2 different sized processes bonded together. And I don't believe that either of them are 65 nanometers.
So 65 nanometer processor, a new processor, what that allows is basically the smaller the nanometers are, the more things you can put on the same physical space.
Exactly. So, so he says, thus this probably means Nikon's 1-inch research project was fabricated at Tower Semiconductor, which began a 65 nanometer image sensor program. You know, we talked about that.
Yes, we did.
A couple of weeks back, and we weren't sure why they developed this. This is possibly why. So that program was back in Japan in 2014. In other words, we have another possible large sensor producer that now has stacked capabilities and on a fab local to the Nikon research team.
So not only Sony produced stacked sensors, there are at least 2 more players that we know of.
Yeah, exactly. So Tom goes on to say, so I'd conclude that there are 2 likely possibilities for Nikon's flagship camera image sensor, that they somehow got Sony Imaging to agree to let them use a derivative of the existing sensors, or that Nikon specified a new sensor to use and or create their own new technology. In that latter case, it very well could be the Tower Semiconductor that fabs Nikon's upcoming sensor, which would almost certainly mean a new Nikon specified design.
That's very interesting. He also mentioned that Nikon's sensor department has been running since something like 1988.
Yes.
So they've been doing things in the shadows. He also betting that either Sony or Tower Semiconductor will produce that Z9 sensor, so no one else. And he also predicts, according to just amount of emails he received that people say, I'm definitely buying this camera, he expects the camera to be sold out for quite some time. Now, speaking of sensor rumors, we also had another source, thanks David, and he thinks that potentially the stack sensor technology may come from the new version of Foveon sensor, which Sigma uses generally. So there could be a potential deal that they struck in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the other things that we don't know are the high resolution blackout free EVF, electronic viewfinder, probably 5.76 megapixels or even 9K viewfinder with a 120 hertz refresh rate and supposedly or possibly the resolution could be reduced to increase the refresh rate.
Exactly. So you got blackout free. That's the most important bit in there.
Yeah.
But also, yes, most of the cameras nowadays, they have either native resolution at smaller refresh rate or you get a higher refresh rate at slightly reduced resolution. And that's through the viewfinder.
Yeah. And we have had a number of people say, if this is going to be the case, put me down for one. I want one immediately.
In terms of frame rates, so we're looking at 20 frames per second. So that's good. That's better than D6 for sure.
Yeah.
And then the interesting bit as well, that's there's a 16-bit RAW stills recording. Now, before that, all Nikon cameras recorded 14-bit uncompressed maximum. So the Sony now records a 16-bit.
Yeah.
So potentially Nikon will record a 16-bit as well. Now, looking at 16-bit still images were generally kind of designed to be taken with medium format cameras. So it's a lot more data. And on some medium format cameras, it looks really well. Now, let's say if we compare it to Fuji GFX 100 or 100S that came out, a lot of people say, well, there's actually not much difference in terms of image quality between 14-bit and 16-bit. So it doesn't just justify the double the data that the camera produces.
Sure.
Now, obviously, when Nikon camera comes out, we will compare that and we will check if it's worth doing it or not. I tend to shoot with highest possible image quality, uncompressed.
Of course you do.
Since I have lots of storage. But I think, if you can record the best possible image quality, why not?
Yes. I mean, I have another thought on that. It's just that the Z6 and Z7, 6.2 and 7.2 all shoot at higher frames per second with a reduced bit rate. So perhaps 20 frames per second at 16-bit RAW is going to be completely unrealistic, but a lower bit rate for that. We don't know. This is the stuff we don't know.
Okay, well, we covered resolution again for video, 8K 30 frames, and then 4K 120, 60, and 30 frames. Who knows, maybe at 1080p we'll get something like 240 frames.
That would be cool.
You never know.
Super slow-mo.
Absolutely. Well, the data, the process should allow for that much data, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, improved AF speed and also stunning AF tracking better than the D6. Now, Nikon confirmed that according to them, they say, trust me, it's going to be better than D6.
Yeah.
So now D6 has the best autofocus performance among all DSLRs created by Nikon.
That's right.
So this one should be even better. Well, good luck to them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to beat.
It is. We also are speculating 2 XQD or CF Express Type B memory card slots. I think that's pretty much a given.
Absolutely.
An ISO range of 64 is nice as a base ISO, to 25,600 with Nikon's own high 1 and high 2 ISO in there as well.
Personally, I would expect the native ISO to hit at least 51 or something, 52 or 100,000, and then high 1 and high 2 on top.
Yeah.
This is just based on D5 and D6 cameras.
Right.
So they're designed for low light performance. So therefore, they have a lot native resolution, range is quite large.
Yeah.
Now, again, D6 is one of the best cameras in low light. To release the camera, let's say with 50 megapixels and better noise levels.
Yes.
That's quite a task, isn't it?
It is. And I worry that the noise levels at 25,000 and beyond would be so high on a camera with that many pixels that it might just make the shots unusable.
Absolutely. And personally, if it does well at 6400, I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. We are hoping Sorry, you said that. Improved noise levels. You said that already.
Yeah,
Well done.
I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Excellent. We are also expecting a new user interface, aren't we? So no little LCD on the bottom of the camera as we usually get with those flagship bodies. We have top LCD, back monitor, and then that little bonus LCD screen at the bottom. I personally don't think I would miss it, but
I would.
Yeah.
It's just I like extra screens. I like to have lots of screens when I work with.
You've got like a full screen setup.
Absolutely. So one runs my ISO aperture and shutter speed, another one just as a stock and share tracker, so you just see going up and down, all the candles you want.
On the back of the camera. So that might mean a slight reduction in size of the camera potentially over the D6 as well.
Yeah, a lot of people put D6 and Z9 image side by side, basically the same size, but because we don't actually know physical specifications, I personally think it should be smaller.
I think so too. Now, we're also expecting a new ENEL 18 something battery. This would be the D.
The D, yes.
The expectancy would be that it would allow for hot charging, so you could charge the camera and use it at the same time, which would do away with all those faffy AC adapters.
Absolutely. So basically all the latest technology that we now have in Z6 and Z7 Mark II cameras.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of professional features that we normally have on flagship cameras like D5 and D6, we expect to see a gigabit LAN or Ethernet port, so your camera is plugged directly into router, so you can upload your images from Tokyo Olympics in seconds.
Exciting.
USB-C, which is a given, all cameras have this nowadays. Wi-Fi as well, and then potentially GPS unit, the same unit as we would have on D6. Now, this one is 50-50 for me because obviously that may increase the size of the camera. D6 viewfinder is slightly bigger compared to D5.
That's right.
But you never know.
No, I mean, one of the things that GPS causes is not being able to make the camera out of magnesium alloy. Of course, if you have a GPS unit in there, you can't have a metal camera because no GPS will make it through. So it does mean that it might be made out of different materials. But anyway, that one, we're still on the fence about that one.
Oh yeah, the one thing we forgot to mention is 10-pin socket is nice to have.
Oh, the 10-pin socket. Yeah, we'd like that. And you know what I'd like is the circular viewfinder, like a proper circular, so you can put rubber eye cups. Very important. Particularly,
it's the little things that matter, isn't it?
It is. So in terms of release date, what are we expecting?
So we expect it to be released in fall 2021. Now, mentioning this, I think that specifications will be announced around Tokyo Olympics in July, where the prototype cameras will be used by professional photographers. And Nikon did at least D6 announcements. They did development announcements first, and then we had specifications, and then we had a camera release several months later.
So Tom, our mate Tom, does say, generally it appears to me that Nikon does development announcements about at the point where the first small-scale manufacturing begins to create official non-mule prototypes. So non-mule means that it's got all of the kind of test components in it that can then be tested by real-world photographers and then could go back and be changed at some point.
Do you think they 3D print them, or do they make them out of papier-mâché?
I think that they are the final pieces that Nikon expect to put in the camera, but that it doesn't mean it's the final stage of production. They'll go back to the bench and change things.
Yeah, so it's effectively pretty much final release, maybe just cosmetic things that are a little bit not there.
Yeah, exactly. So that seems about right in order to have official prototypes out for the Tokyo Olympics. Let's see what happens.
Interesting. So speaking of price, Nikon Rumours reports $6,000 to $7,000. Now, we don't agree with that. We think the camera will be more expensive. Just looking at Sony A1 price in UK, it's £6,500 or $6,500 in US. Now, because this camera is designed to be slightly different, especially the built-in grip, that's a good sign of it. We expect the camera to be at least $6,500 plus. So between $6,500 to $7,500. And I personally think if they release the camera at $6,500, that will be a really good aggressive move from Nikon. That will make a lot of people think about, well, should I buy A1 or should I stick to my trustworthy Nikon?
Yes, exactly. Now, one question that someone pointed out to us on the live stream the other day was, why did they call it Z9 and not Z1? Yeah,
when you say this, you should imagine that this question was written in capitals. Since this represents the whole internet in mind. This is a difficult one because, especially, I think it's logical to call it Z1 as you look at D1 to D6 range.
Yes.
Unless we're going to see Another flagship.
Unless we see a Z1, which is like 100 megapixels and becomes, I don't know, some other kind of beast. Who knows?
Absolutely. Well, Nikon never explained the logic of naming the cameras and the numbers behind them.
No, they don't. So we don't know. Now, in terms of the Z8, a few people have asked, when's the Z8 being released? What do we know?
Well, Nikon said there are no official plans for Z8 yet. That means that they're not making one this year. What it tells me that we probably will see the camera in, let's say, first 2 quarters of next year. It makes sense to release the camera Z9 in September, have some sales, and then early in January, let's say, announce Z8 with potential release around March to May.
Yes. Okay. And that's all the news on the Z9.
No financial news this week.
Yay.
Nah, you wish.
Oh.
There's more. Obviously, there's always more since you love it so much. Nikon Rumours published extracts from Q3 financial report call transcript. We covered it before, but there's some important points. So obviously, a lot of it is marketing malarkey, but my job here is to translate it into the plain English.
Okay, so if I ask you the question, you'll be able to translate it into normal speak.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Do you want like a royal English, or do you want the English from the hoods?
Honestly, English that I understand, whatever it is, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So the first question that I have for you, their statement was, imaging products. We had a record quarterly sales for mirrorless and cameras. What does that mean?
The translation is Nikon is increasing their market share in mirrorless
stuff. Okay, good. Okay, next one. Imaging products business will turn profitable in real times if we exclude extraordinary costs such as restructuring related costs and others.
All right, basically they say we would be profitable if we wouldn't have to spend the money on restructuring. Okay. Now, Nikon closed a couple of factories in Japan and consolidated production of mirrorless cameras in Thailand. So this all costs money. So restructuring costs money. But what they say is, well, look, if you wouldn't have this, we actually would be profitable.
Okay. How about imaging product segment was revised upward, Japanese yen 5 billion, reflecting the improvement in the third quarter.
We expect more sales.
Okay, good. What does that mean? Okay, how about we expect to have improved operating profit in the imaging products business as much as Japanese yen 3 billion.
Again, they forecasting the increase in sales, basically, and that probably comes from ILC, which is interchangeable lens cameras, or mostly mirrorless.
Okay. Imaging products business with the high-end shifting and structural reforms aims to be profitable even when revenue is less than Japanese yen 150 billion.
All right, what that means, they say that photographic market is shrinking, and we talked about it on pretty much every podcast that we released.
Yes.
What they say is we're restructuring the way that we can be profitable at lower volume of sales. So just to be, because a lot of companies, they think, oh, we're going to sell the same amount of gear as we're going to do this year, last year or 2 years ago. Now, because the whole sales are shrinking, they say, well, we need to make sure that we position ourselves that we can do less sales, but still stay profitable.
Okay. Right. And how about imaging product business is going well recently, but we need to make further efforts in order to stably generate profit because it seems that we've just been helped by the market recovery.
Well, what they say is that they had a free fall in terms of sales, not a really free fall, but it picked up. I mean, obviously we had a big kind of, sales going off the cliff in March last year, and then kind of slowly picking up and increasing this year. This month's CIPA number, January sales are actually higher than last year. So that's really good. But what they say is we need to do still more work. We need to make sure that we're prepared for all the obstacles that we can encounter during this year. So that's what it is. But let's just recap the whole last 3 weeks. Yeah. So it's been busy 3 weeks it was an emotional roller coaster, wasn't it? So yeah,
up and down.
Then bunch of news, then Z9. So it was pretty amazing. But let's talk about this. So we had new Pro camera announced, new NX Studio software, which is free. Stocks and shares are up from the beginning of the year, and they had reasonably good financial results.
Yeah, good. Was that so hard?
It's not all doom and gloom.
It's not. All right, next up, we have Nikon Rumours, who published 11 unannounced Nikkor Z lens patents from Nikon.
That's nice. So those are the patents, obviously, for the lenses that hasn't been released yet or announced at all. So that's what's in the pipeline. And generally, those things may take from anything from, let's say, 3 months from, for announcement to, let's say, 5 years or so, or never come out at all.
Sure. They're not on the roadmap, so these are completely new to us. The first one is the Nikkor Z 100mm f1.4, which excites Con very much.
Yeah, this lens is very dear to me. I think my 10514 is going to go on eBay soon.
Okay. Keep a lookout for that. Nikkor Z 16 to 34 f2.8. So this is a new wide angle. I couldn't quite understand the logic when we've got a 14-24 2.8 and a 14 to 30 f4. Now we've got a 16 to 34 2.8 potentially.
All right, I think this is going to be a direct replacement of 17 to 35 2.8.
Okay.
That Nikon had for about 20, 25 odd years.
Yeah.
Now, this lens at the time was not only used by landscape photographers, because that's the, not curved front element, so it's flat, so you could use filters on it.
Yes.
Now, with 14-24 f mount, you can't use filters with Nikon solutions. And then in the last 3 years, I think they would develop some sort of filters, curved filters that you can put on it. Now, the Z mount 14-24 allows for filter attachment. They're still very expensive. But apart from landscape photographers, a lot of these lenses have been used by documentary photographers and news photographers. So I think that's potentially what Nikon is addressing with the release of, with the patent of this lens.
Yeah. We also have some DX lenses potentially. We've got an 18 to 50 f2.8 to 4.
So that would be similar to 16 to 80. Is that what it is?
I mean, similar aperture, but that's about it. But maybe like a semi-professional DX lens. A 16 to 50 f4. So probably higher quality than the little 16 to 50 that comes.
That's an interesting one. I personally think that they will release maybe only one of the two.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
We have 16 to 50 with Z50.
Yeah.
Which is kind of budget solution.
Very much so.
And then 18 to 50 2.8 to 4 would be a 1-up. So something like 24 to 70 f4 in a full frame.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would be ideal if it was a little bit longer. But anyway, the 18 to 140 is already on the roadmap. So
that's true.
It would be interesting. We've also got 2 DX wide angles. So a 10 to 21 f2.8 and a 12 to 24 f2.8.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Now, I personally think that 10 to 21 could be not 2.8, but something like 3.5 to 4.5.
Sure.
So again, inexpensive budget solution similar to 10 to 20 AFP lens that they have for F mount.
Yes.
And then 12-24 would be a pro range similar to 12-24 f4 and F mount. But if they can push it to 2.8, that would be nice.
Yes, exactly. And then the last one, we don't know for sure. It's a 10 to 15 f2.8. This is FX. Potentially officially?
Yeah, it looks to me that it could be very similar to 8 to 15 fisheye that Nikon has for F mount. So we could potentially have the circular image on wide angle side of things. And then at 15, we would have a square fisheye effect. Now, Nikon generally doesn't use their old design for Z mount lenses, which actually I really appreciate. So it's completely new ground up design. But looking at the image of that patent, it looks to be that they could potentially repurpose it. We never know. We'll find out.
Yes, exactly. And then we've got some long lenses.
300, 400, 500, and 600 lenses. Nice. Well, people were clamoring for those.
Yes.
And I think we may see some at July Tokyo Olympics.
Potentially some prototypes. We obviously have the 400 and the 600 on the roadmap already. So I'd be interested to see what of those lenses gets added to.
Yeah, I think 400 and 600 makes sense to release first.
Yes.
Then you can add 300 and then last is 500. And then we also going to have 100 to 300 zoom, isn't it?
Yeah, and the, is it 100 to 300? And we've got a 200 to 600. We've got a 100 to 400 and a 200 to 600.
Okay, so 100 to 400 would be equivalent to something like of 8 to 400. Yeah, and looking at the roadmap, it looks about the same size as well.
It does in terms of height. And then the 200 to 600 looks pretty identical to the 200 to 500 is one you made earlier.
Yeah, so that's one I made earlier from papier mâché. Yeah. Clay. I was just, remember the Patrick Swayze. Me and my wife, obviously, together. Now, 80 to 400 roughly will be the same size.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good script, isn't it? We're acting on script that we were given by me.
By you. You wrote
Yes.
it, so that's good. Excellent. Next up.
Next up, Japanese website Newswitch published an article saying that. But let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Is it Newswitch or is it Newswitch? Because if it's Newswitch, I read some news about new Nintendo Switch coming out soon.
I'm looking forward to that. That would be good. No, news. I'm hoping it's Newswitch. Well,
So
that's
some
kind
dark
of
crafts.
Yeah, that is kind of.
It's like they get what they do. They have the magic ball, and they say, okay, what Nikon is gonna give us, and they look into the ball.
Maybe it's knee. What? Never mind.
Anyway, that's how we write our news.
Look at the crystal ball. So what did Newswitch or Newswitch say?
Well, since I can't understand what they say, and it's translated from Japanese by Google, could you read that for me?
I will try. Nikon has developed a hand camera, don't know if that's an accurate translation, that enables high-speed image control of mobile work robots, mobile manipulators. I'm going to do the robot now. The image
Can I do the wave?
Yeah, go for it. The image is taken in 500th of a second, at 500th of a second.
Interesting.
And the image data is processed to control the misalignment of the robot hand. This is happening at 100 hertz or 100 times per second. And in the future, Nikon hopes to increase it to 500 hertz. Do what you will with that information.
Don't you find it funny that the news about robots is being translated by the machine from Japanese to English?
It's like Inception, but with robots. It's the robot within a robot. We also have
a
picture.
A picture that was floating or leaked on Twitter, and it's a picture of EP5G power connector. Now, what does it mean? It's a dummy battery that goes inside Z50 and allows to connect your camera to the AC pipeline.
So ordinarily with some of these cameras, with most cameras in fact, you have a thing called an EH5. We're now on the D version, so EH5D now. And then you have a dummy battery that goes into your camera that connects to the EH5. So you can use the camera while it's attached to the wall, essentially. The Z50 has a major problem in that the battery is so tiny, it's so little, that it doesn't last very long. So having an EP5G, which would be the dummy battery for that, would solve a lot of problems in using the Z50 for things like web conferencing, for video work, for streaming, all that kind of stuff. So
you've done the Vlogger kit review and you use Z50 quite extensively. So what's your measure of like how long does the battery last, let's say, for video production?
It probably start to finish lasts about an hour if you were solidly recording. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what features you're using with video recording and what quality you're shooting in. It can stretch to a little bit more, but it is frustrating to have to constantly recharge that battery. And the spares have been out of stock for quite a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Finally starting to see those come through.
Absolutely.
So any Z50 owners will know the issue and be familiar with it, having an EP5G, although it will probably be quite an expensive solution at about £150 with the AC adapter.
I mean, otherwise it would be Z50 Mark II, but since they haven't announced one and we don't think it's going to be coming out this year, the 150 solution is a lot cheaper.
It's very true. It's cheaper than buying a new camera. So that's that. Let's see what Nikon come up with. Hopefully something soon.
All right, so let's move on to basically software and firmware updates.
Yay.
All right, Nikon NEF Codec has been updated to version 1.31.1, where they fixed the following issues. Fixed an issue that prevented files in recycle bin being restored to their original locations after NEF Codec was installed. So imagine you deleted your images, and they thought, oh, I deleted the wrong ones. Those were actually the good ones. Go to the bin, right-click, restore.
They're gone
Clean
forever.
the bin.
They're gone forever. Never coming back.
It's a nice bug to fix, isn't it? So for some of you that don't know what Nikon NEF Codec is, basically it allows you to open Nikon RAW files in your Finder or Explorer on Windows or Mac as just a JPEG or let's say TIFF image. So you just double click on it and just open it. So you don't need to use, let's say, Adobe RAW or NX Studio just to preview your images.
Yeah, it's very useful. They also, Blackmagic released Video Assist 3.4 update with added Blackmagic RAW recording support from the Z6 II and the Z7 II cameras.
So Nikon enabled it on their cameras. Now Blackmagic enabled it on their devices.
Yeah.
So now they can work together.
Yay.
Yay.
Meyer Optik announced a Görlitz Primaplan 58 f1.9 Mark II lens for the Nikon F mount.
Okay.
So what is that?
Well, priced at $899 and expected in Z mount in the future, this is a release of old classic 58mm lens. So it's 1.7, which is a bit of a not aperture. I would expect 1.8 or 1.9. But basically, it's got very interesting rendering, this lens. So very similar to Soviet type of rendering, where the bokeh at the back is very donut-y.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't use it as a professional lens, but as a kind of a special effects lens. It's very nice. And obviously, it's manual focus. It's, I wouldn't call it inexpensive, but it's there.
It's there, and it's cheaper than, say, a 58 f0.95. Very different lens.
Or 600mm f4.
It's cheaper than most lenses.
Yes, or a car.
It wasn't a very good analogy, was it?
Nah.
Never mind. All right, several technical articles have been updated on the Nikon service support website. So first up, we have a list of approved memory cards for the Nikon D6 with new memory cards added.
Nice.
We have lock mirror up for cleaning, grayed out. What was that about?
All right, so sometimes you want to sense clean on your camera if you know how. So, and you go to the menu and it's grayed out and you're not sure what's happening. So in that article, Nikon says, check those settings, see if that's affected. In my personal experience, it normally means that your battery is fairly low, below 50-60%. So generally my advice, you want to sense clean your camera, you definitely, charge your battery in full and stick it in there.
Fair enough. Yeah, you wouldn't want the battery dying in the middle of trying to lock the mirror up.
Yeah, you don't want your shutter to close on you with a mirror because that's basically an expensive shutter replacement.
Ouch.
Absolutely. And speaking of battery life, Nikon also updated article on their AA battery life information. So they mainly mentioned this update based on early Nikon cameras like D100, I think, can use AA batteries. So some of the digital cameras that can use double batteries.
Right.
So, but also, I would say if you use AA batteries in your battery packs, this information is quite useful. So what they say is, here's the graph of how those NiMH or alkaline batteries work. Do buy a good brand. We don't really advise you to use AA batteries, so just use it at your own risk. But here's the graph. That's how it works. Buy a lot more than you think you will need.
That's it in a nutshell. And then we also have a Mac OS Big Sur compatibility list update, which includes Studio NX. Nice.
So NX, from the notes that I went through that. I go through all releases. So I look what's interesting there. So now Studio NX is not native Apple M1 software. It still runs under Rosetta 2 shell. That's effectively an emulator which runs all the software which is not designed for M1.
Yes.
So we now know that Photoshop fully supports M1 chip, so you should see improvements there. Nikon One still doesn't do that, but potentially once they recode it, we will see improvements there as well. Now, Webcam Utility, however, runs as an Apple Silicon native app in the universal version of Chrome, so Chrome browser.
Well, there you go. As a point of discussion, with no immediate plans to release a Z8, are we going to see a D850 replacement? Will Nikon announce a D880 and a Z8 at the same time? Or is this the death of the D800 line? The death of the family.
The death in the family. It's a nice Pokemon reference, Becky. Finally, I got the reference that you said to me.
Batman.
Anyway, so did Nikon just kiss goodbye the D800 series?
Who knows?
All right. Well, my personal opinion, Nikon will be leaving a lot of money on the table. So there's still people who clamor for D880.
Yes, for sure.
However, if you're a professional photographer and if Z8 is as good as D850 or better, wouldn't you think at this point, well, it's time to switch? S-line is so good nowadays and actually better than F-mount lenses. Just look for reviews. Why wouldn't I just switch them? Because, well, we all go in mirrorless nowadays. I think it's quite important to understand that before we were thinking, well, is Nikon supporting both lines or not? With Z9 announcement, we clearly see that Nikon is going to go mirrorless. Yeah. Full on.
It's very true. And I mean, apart from that, Nikon are probably one of the only companies that haven't officially said we're not doing any more DSLR stuff. I know that Canon did a few years back. And most of the other brands are not making DSLRs anymore. It's all
they're kind of mirrorless from ground up, pretty much.
Exactly. Everything is going that way. So Nikon have kind of said their concentration is on mirrorless, but they haven't officially killed off the DSLR line yet. Just to use very dramatic terms, everything is dramatic when it comes to killing off the DSLR system.
Well, we are on the internet.
Yeah, we have to be dramatic sometimes.
There's either 0 to 100. Turn it up to 11.
That's right.
Yeah.
So do you think that a D880 replacement would be a wise, sorry, a D850 replacement? D880 is what everyone's calling it. Do you think that would be a good move by Nikon?
It's a difficult one because A, obviously it's a mixed messaging. B is, well, why to reduce your, Z sales, basically,
your Z appeal.
Yeah, the Steam is picking up. They going full on in terms of marketing with their Z series cameras. Eve Z8 is better than D850, and it feels nice. It's a big camera. And with Z9 announced, we know they can make big cameras. So if there is the same camera with shade-off grip, with an optional grip accessory, I think a lot of people would say, well, it is time to switch. However, what my thinking is that obviously some people will still continue with D880. They're not going to have as many sales as D850.
Yeah.
Because D850 for many people, and for me as well, it's a groundbreaking camera. In my personal opinion, this is currently the best Nikon DSLR.
For sure.
I personally think that D880 can potentially become a new F6, a digital F6.
Like the sort of legacy camera. Nikon have said, this is the ultimate DSLR. You can't get better than this. And we're not going to do another one after this point.
Absolutely.
That sort of thing.
Because let's talk about D880 specifications. And that should answer the question why we would call it F6, digital F6.
Yeah.
So they will use the same sensor and processor as they would have on their flagship camera. So let's say Z8. Everything else would come from DSLR. So frame rate probably is going to be lower just due to limitation of DSLRs.
Yes. Unless
they have live view option, which will be faster frame rate. Autofocus system will be the same as D6 because there's no point of investing in research and development in improving autofocus system, which is legacy at this point.
No, and interestingly enough, we've already seen that kind of DSLR to mirrorless hybrid in the D780. So a D880, and I kind of understand why it's called D880 now. D780, D880. Didn't get that before.
Interesting.
That is possibly going to be a similar thing where in live view you have all of these mirrorless features, if you like, mirrorless AF system, etc., frame rate and all that kind of stuff. And then when you're shooting through the viewfinder, it just becomes a good solid DSLR. So that's a possibility. But then, there is a price factor as well, because so many people will not want to spend thousands of pounds on a DSLR when the D850 has kind of hit its peak at 2,500 now. I think when it first came out, it was 3,000.
I think it's something 3 to 3.5.
Yeah, exactly. And something like, and the D780 kind of proves this. That was a very expensive camera when it first came out. In fact, the price was so close to the D850 that a lot of people questioned, why would I buy this DSLR? If they did the same thing between the D850 and the Z8, where it's, how much do you think it's going to be? I
think it will be at least at £4,000.
Right. So then the question becomes, why would I buy a system that's not going to be invested in the future, that Nikon are no longer going to release lenses for? They're not going to update the old glass to make it more compatible.
Yeah, I think that D880 will be highly regarded camera and liked by a lot of photographers. Yes.
Yes.
And people will love it. That's why we call it F6, because F6 has been out for 20 years, and I think that D880 they can run it for 8 years and then just update the sensor and XP processor, and then keep it pretty much the same. And it will be loved by hobbyists, enthusiasts, and maybe pros who are not switching to Zs, but they're not going to have the sales of the same sales as D850 sales anymore, because people will start to switch. They mentioned Z9 will be better than D6, so Z8 should be better than D850.
Yes, exactly. There you go.
There you go.
Now, third-party news. Photoshop gets significant updates. So Photoshop itself gets a big lift on the Mac OS version, where Apple M1 Silicon is now supported.
Oh, nice. So we should see some speed improvements, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And Camera Raw also gets a lot of changes. Now, one of the things that gets talked about a lot, and someone mentioned this on our live stream last week, is Super resolution. What is this, Con?
Super resolution makes everything super. You put the image, it becomes super image.
Right.
You eat a slice of bread, it becomes super slice of bread. You understand how it works?
Yeah.
Now, people ask that. So what it does is basically increases the size of the image, at least by, well, doubling it.
Wow.
So if you've got 10,000 pixels image, it makes it 20,000 pixels. Now,
whoa, just more.
Some people say it's just going to kill high resolution sensors. I don't think it will, personally.
I don't think it will.
I think it's designed for your audio camera, so for your mobile phone images. So if you suddenly decide that, oh, I want to make a family book and use the images from 10 years ago, it's highly likely that your camera was something like 10, 12 megapixels, like something like D200.
Yeah.
Or your mobile phone would be around 4, 5 megapixels.
That's right. I had like a little flip phone with a camera in it at the time, which was about 3 megapixels. And the images are rubbish, but you know, if I could make them super resolution, they might look less rubbish.
Absolutely. And super resolution is not new.
No.
It's been super before. Different companies designed it. Back in 2004, I think, when I had exhibition and I shot stuff with D200, I used On1 Genuine Fractals software to give me the printed size, because I think I was printing something like A0s, and D200 image would only give me something like A3+.
Yes.
So, and it did job really well. Currently, you have an option from a company called Topaz. I think it's called Enhanced AI or something like this.
Yes.
So, but for subscribers and users of Adobe Package, which many people are, it's nice to have this feature thrown in.
Yes, exactly.
Now, there was a couple of days later, since we record our first version of podcast, also Adobe released Lightroom. And again, new updates there, new camera supports, etc., etc. One of the interesting features is they implemented a new beta tethering system.
Okay.
And they say in their comments, just go and try it, let us know how it works. So we expect it to be better than the previous tethering system. Again, if you have any guys comments on this, do leave it in the comment below. We probably will test ourselves. Well, I'll try to do it.
Okay, good.
See what happens.
I probably won't. I never shoot tethered. So yeah, that will be interesting to see.
Absolutely. Let's move on to reviews. We have 2 reviews this week, all published by ePhotozine. The first one is for Nikkor Z 20mm f1.88 S lens.
So they're now, interestingly, Simon Stafford also reviewed this in the most recent Nikon Owner magazine. But what they say is that there are so many excellent lenses on the market from all marks that we could end up spoilt for choice.
I like to be spoilt for choice.
We do. In terms of pure performance, the Nikon Z lenses are right at the top of the tree. I love that analogy. Right up there. And time and again have released superb optics. They also handle extremely well. The only bugbear is the price, but then again, there is a cost attached to quality. And value for money is not just about price. In terms of what we get for our cash and how we can make the lens work for us, this is yet another absolutely superb offering. So essentially, they liked it.
Editor's choice.
So the pros were outstanding sharpness, no flare, virtually no central chromatic aberration, reasonably light, fast silent autofocus, silent aperture control, nice bokeh, close focusing, fast and bright f1.8 aperture, and vignetting can be a creative advantage.
Oh, I like that.
But
all my photos have creative advantage.
I love the creative advantage.
Because I don't know what I'm doing, so it's all creative. It's just how I envision this.
However, the vignetting is also one of the cons. So.
All right. So what they didn't like is high price. We talked about this. Yes, it's high price, but you do get a much better lens even compared to F-mount.
Yes.
Age chromatic aberrations, which is correctable. Vignetting, which is also correctable. And barrel distortion, which is also correctable.
Yeah. So it's all correctable.
It's nice to have cons, just like me. That is correctable. You can't correct me, though.
No, you can't. The only thing that's not correctable is the high price at this point.
Yeah, it's too late for that.
I think the rest is actually fairly handleable and manageable.
That's true. And then they also had a review of 24-200 f46.3 VR lens. So what did they say back?
I think they agreed with you on your review. And do check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Con reviewed it a few months ago. So they say that the lens is complex in terms of construction and also in terms of performance. However, there's no doubt that as a general purpose travel zoom, it could be just so useful that any disadvantage becomes far outweighed. It's compact, light, well made, weather resistant, and an excellent performer. The very restricted maximum apertures available may be compensated for by the excellent VR performance, although that's only fine for stationary subject matter. Wildlife, for example, will still need a higher shutter speed, so high ISOs might have to be employed. Now, they say on the principle that we will succeed by following the maxim f8 and be there, then with this lens, it's almost set up to deliver maximum performance at that point. It does much more than that, of course, but the essence is that it is light enough and convenient enough to actually be with us wherever we are. There's also the price point. So at that price, if we have a need for a travel zoom, maximum versatility, etc., then for Nikon Z users, we may well have a no-brainer.
Oh, no-brainer is all I heard, and that sounds really good. But actually, I do like the reference of F8 and be there. And a lot of people, well, young people, we are young.
Young people.
We're all young in spirit. Don't know how to use, what do you call hyperfocal distance?
Yes.
Yeah, so you generally set to F8, you can set it to whatever, let's say if you're focusing manually, you set it, let's say, to 3 meters or something like this. And then you run and gun. You can have your camera on your chest and just press the button, pretend that you're not taking a picture. And that's what a lot of street and documentary photographers used back in the day. So I like that reference. Here's explanation why.
So the pros are superb sharpness where it counts, no flare, virtually no central chromatic aberration, light and compact, fast silent AF, all pretty much the same things as the 21.8, but we've also got close focusing, weather resistance. The vignetting can also be a creative advantage and excellent VR performance.
Nice. What they didn't like is very restrictive maximum apertures, which you would expect with this type of zoom. You look at 28-300, it's 3.5 to 5.6, so it's not too bad. Age chromatic aberration at 200 millimeter, which is correctable. Vignetting, which is also correctable. And distortion, that is also correctable. In my opinion, 24-100 is the best all-rounder zoom that Nikon ever created. It's smaller and lighter than 28-300. Yes, you do lose this 200 to 300 bit, but you gain an optical performance and mobility. It's also better than any DX18-200 or 18-300 lenses.
Yeah, and I will say that having used the 28-300, the 300 end of that lens is very soft in comparison. So really, it's a 28-200 that you can get away with shooting 300. I wouldn't personally use it at that end. So better to have a shorter range lens, but better quality, I'd say.
Absolutely. And I'm personally a prime user most of the time, but for travel photography, and hopefully we will all travel or start to travel soon.
One day.
This is fantastic all-in-one lens. And for a lot of people who are just keen enthusiasts, I would recommend just get 24-200 for your Z system, and then get a 1 prime that you like. It could be 51.8, it could be 85 if you're into portraiture.
Maybe
35. Could be a macro lens eventually when they release one.
One day.
Absolutely, but it's going to be a good two lens setup in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Now we also have Christopher Frost, who published a comparison of the Nikkor 58 f/0.95 notch lens with a Mitacon Z 50mm f/0.95 on his YouTube channel.
So one is about £5,000, another one is about $900 or something. Or it's 8.5.
The 58 Monox is 8.5.
All right. Okay. You see, because I can't afford it, I don't even know what the price is.
It's like just in the thousands.
Yes. So Nikon is much cheaper.
Right.
So what he concludes is...
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, Nikon one is better than Mitacon. I would expect it.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting comparison. Last week, we recommended his review of this lens, and he compared it to Sigma Art, and I think 51.8 as well. So if you want to see comparison on how the lens renders, obviously with limitations of YouTube compression, but you can at least have a look and make your own conclusions.
Exactly. It's just interesting to see people comparing it to something different by different brands. If you're interested in that sort of thing, his channel's the place to go.
Now, Nigel Donson published a video on his YouTube channel as well called Taking Out My New 24-200 Lens in Different Conditions. Now, this is a half-an-hour video. It's not really a review per se of the lens, but more about his experience as a landscape photographer. So most of it is shot somewhere in the mountains, in the mist and fog and everything. So, but we talked about in the past that a lot of camera and lens reviews, they're not really photographers themselves. No,
or they're not using the lenses for reviews in real life situations that a photographer would use it for. So you don't always get a completely unadulterated and what's the word I'm looking for? Unbiased opinion.
Yeah, but it's also nice to have real photographers talking about cameras and lenses and actually showing the images they've taken with it.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, I think, you shouldn't make your decision based on sharpness and MFT charts or MTF. I still can't remember what that is. You should really go take some sample shots or have a look at, JPEGs or RAW samples online.
Yeah.
And then make your decisions based on that. It could be a crappy lens, but if you love it, I'm sure you can take really good images with it.
Exactly. All right, Pixels for Geeks. A peek inside Nikon super secret design. Sorry, this is the read and watch segment.
Read and watch. Okay, it's going to be a technical one this week.
Yeah. Pixels for Geeks. A peek inside Nikon super secret sensor design lab. Say that 3 times. Super secret sensor.
Sounds like out of James Bond movie.
It does a little bit. Thank you, Woody, for sending that over. So this is an article which is essentially about the super secret sensor design by Nikon. I think it's kind of cool.
So it talks about Nikon designing sensors.
Yes.
Not many people know about Nikon designing their sensors.
No, but it's good that we have an article out there that you can read, and it's not top secret and classified.
Well,
either.
now I'm thinking actually, there's a reason why they don't know, because it's top secret, isn't it?
It's top secret.
Exactly.
And classified.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
The article is mainly just blacked out lines, with like one or two.
Redacted.
Then we have another one, DPI versus print size by Nikon Technical Support. This is quite useful if you don't know, if you're just getting started with printing, then you might not know what DPI to use for your print size. So there's an article by Nikon Tech Support for you. Nice.
And then Richie Talks Nikon published a video about Nikon Z9 announcement where he talks about where the buttons are located, what he thinks the camera will be, etc., etc. I'm sure most of you watched it, but if you didn't, do check it out.
Yeah, exactly. If anyone's a good source of information about Nikon stuff, then Rishi is it.
He's the man.
He is indeed.
All right, and that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. But before we go, where can we find you more on the internet, Becky?
I'm all over the internet.
Yeah, not on the street. I don't want to know where you live.
No, just on the internet. You can visit my website, which is RebeccaDenese.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is Rebecca_Denese. And you?
I'm on Instagram as well at Konstantin Kochkin, and also I have a website which is konstantinkochkin.co.uk.
Nice and simple. Thank you very much for joining us. Please do give us a thumbs up. Do subscribe. If you are listening on a podcast, give us a follow and perhaps leave us a review. And we'll see you very soon.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.